Hello, I'm the Shadow Critic. Happy Halloween. Hello and welcome to the Shadow Critic Halloween special. For this review I've chosen a special Halloween themed episode. It's an episode of the PBS show Arthur. It's called The Haunted Locker. Now this episode is actually pretty interesting because it's one of the only episodes in the entire series not to feature Arthur, the titular character of the show. So you may be asking, if Arthur isn't in this episode, who is? Well, this episode is actually about Prunella. Yeah, Prunella. She's a popular character, right? I mean, people like her, don't they? Don't they?
No.
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 No. No.
No. No.
No.
No.
No.
No. Yes. I mean, no. No.
Okay, I admit it. Everyone hates Prunella. Nobody likes her. She's nobody's favourite character.
Aww.
But look, it was an extremely long hot summer and I didn't start planning for this episode until like September. So I didn't really have much time to look into Halloween themed content. And this is the only thing I could think of. It was either this or the Great Pumpkin with the Peanut characters. And I gotta be honest, I don't know who the Peanuts are. I've never actually seen anything they do. I just know about the Great Pumpkin thing. So unfortunately, we're going to have to suffer through this Arthur-free episode with Prunella as the main character.
Oh no!
Oh, but it might not be so bad. I mean, as a character, she's got some interesting stuff going for her, right? I mean, she's into occult stuff, and she has a blind friend, and oh God, come back, Arthur! Why couldn't this episode have been about you instead? In the intro to this episode, we get a segment about some of the characters facing their fears. The brain asks DW what she's afraid of.
I'm afraid of octopussies.
Did I mishear that? Did she just say octopussies? Octopussies?
Octopussies.
Look, I could make a joke about octopussies and how many sea cucumbers you need for them, but this is a family show, so let's just move on. Brain then tells Prunella that it's her turn to face her fears.
Prunella, it's time to face your fear!
Shut your yap.
And so, with the intro out of the way, the episode starts. The episode begins with Prunella at school when she finds out her locker is gone. Mr. Haney tells her that her locker has been removed for repairs and that he's given her locker 237 instead. Fern overhears their conversation and tells Prunella a scary story about her new locker. Fern tells Prunella that her new locker once belonged to a kid called Little Jack Murphy. Fern explains that Jack Murphy noticed strange sounds and smells coming from the locker.
He noticed strange sounds and even stranger smells.
Then bad things started happening to him.
Then one day, he just disappeared.
Hey, you know what? If this episode turns out to be true, that means that a kid would have died in the official Arthur canon. This might just be the darkest episode of Arthur ever. Prunella dismisses Fern's story and she goes to see her new locker. It seems normal, but Prunella is still cautious. Later, Francine takes a photo of Prunella.
I'm doing a story on your haunted locker for the Star.
Slow news day, huh? Well, don't worry, Francine. I'm sure your hit readers will eat this ghost story up. Later on, as Prunella is at her locker, she notices strange smells and unexplained sounds.
Smells a little like onions.
After school, Prunella's blind friend is helping her build a model of the Eiffel Tower for a school project. But Prunella is preoccupied because she's too busy engaging in witchcraft and Satan worship.
Today, strange occurrences foretold came true.
For those of you who don't know, Prunella's entire character is that she's into the occult. which is kind of strange to see for a character on a 90s kids show. Look, I'm not saying that Prunella has demonic powers, but I am saying that she's sacrificed at least a few kids at Black Sabbath festivals. While Prunella is using her dark powers, she gets a bad sign. The following day, her bad luck continues as her class is cancelled and she has to store the project in her locker. She's too afraid to store her project in her locker, so she takes it with her to her classes, but this results in it getting more and more damaged. At lunch, Prunella complains that her project is almost ruined.
Maybe I should just call it the Awful Tower.
Why not store it in your locker?
Haven't you heard? Prunella has locker 237, the haunted locker.
That's ridiculous.
As you can see, Brain doesn't have time for that bullshit.
Prunella, whatever is wrong with your locker, there's a logical explanation for it.
Brain gives Prunella the old logical explanation argument because he's a future Reddit neckbeard skeptic. Prunella goes to confront her locker. She tells it she's not afraid of it and she puts her project inside it. At home, Francine calls Prunella with some news about their school's history. She says that there was never a kid called Jack Murphy at their school. However, there was a kid called Jay Mayberry. He only went to the school for a year, and it was while he was in the 4th grade. Prunella then has a nightmare about her locker, and I have to be honest, it's actually kind of freaky. The locker eats her project, vomits it out, and then it threatens to eat her.
You look like a tasty little morsel, as tasty as little Jay Mayberry.
The locker has giant eyes and sharp metal teeth. It's actually kind of intimidating. There's something really off and weird looking about it. It's so big. It towers over her with those awful eyes and sharp teeth. Look, I'm not going to act like this is the scariest thing I've ever seen, but if I saw this when I was a kid, I think it would have scared me. Prunella is too afraid to go near her locker, so she just plans to tell her teacher that she lost her project. But her blind friend tells her to stop acting like such a cuck, so Prunella faces her fear. As Prunella is getting her project, she hears more noises, including what sounds like a voice.
Need something.
Jack? I mean, Jay? Is that you? What is it that you need?
More salt.
She figures out that the smell is stronger near the back of the locker, so she moves it out of the way.
The smell is even stronger here.
Prunella finds a vent, so she follows it into a nearby hallway. You know, for a kid who's afraid of a locker, it sure is strange that she's willing to walk alone down this creepy, empty hallway. Prunella discovers that the ghost was actually just a lunch lady.
You're the ghost?
Ghost? I don't think so, honey.
And the smells and sounds were coming from the vent. Later on, Fern admits to making the whole thing up. She says she was screwing with Prunella because she's an asshole. But as the group walks away, a strange occurrence happens.
I kind of wish the locker had been haunted.
Wait a minute, that's a child laughing, and this is supposedly a ghost. So it's apparently canon. Arthur has a body count, and it somehow includes kids. This is the last show on Earth I thought would have a body count, let alone one with kids. But there you have it. And with that, the episode ends. So what did I think of the episode? Overall, it's a pretty strong episode. However, there were some inconsistencies. For instance, you could ask, well, if Prunella was that afraid of the locker, why didn't she just ask one of her friends to go with her to the locker? I mean, it's not like this was a permanent thing. She was only using that locker while her own one was repaired. So I'm sure her friends would have helped her out. But these are small and irrelevant details. Overall, the episode was strong. It was concise with a pretty interesting narrative. The episode had nice pacing. Prunella was either always scared or learning new information. There wasn't really any long periods in between where nothing happened. It was always pretty fast. This episode also puts the spotlight on Fern and Prunella. Prunella is an underutilized character. She doesn't really play a big role in the Arthur series. Probably because she's in a grade higher than Arthur's, so she isn't really in too many episodes. She's also a girl, so the combination of her being a girl and being older than Arthur just means that she isn't really in many episodes, because why would Arthur hang out with her that much? The episode also focuses on Fern. Once again we see that Fern likes to tell creative stories and enjoys scaring people. I guess she didn't learn her lesson after scaring Arthur and his friends with that story about the umbrella. Oh, that's what I should have done this episode on, the one with the umbrella. Ah well, it's too late now. Fern's a pretty quiet character. You might even call her something of a mouse, so it's nice to see her and Prunella get a spotlight when they're often overlooked. Overall, this episode had a very strong Goosebumps feeling to it. This episode really feels like a Goosebumps story. Just scary enough, but not so scary that you can't show it to kids. And that's about the level of horror I like. I see a lot of very scary movies nowadays. Modern horror. It's very psychological, very dark, very intense, and I gotta be honest, I don't really like that. I said this in my Child's Play review. I prefer when horror is a bit lighter and takes itself a bit less seriously, just because otherwise it gets too scary, you know what I mean? It gets so scary that you can't sleep anymore. So this episode is quite good at being scary, but not so scary that your kids will never sleep again. This episode had a strong mystery element to it. The entire time you're questioning why the locker has these strange smells, why it has these unexplained sounds. And the mystery is pretty clever. I like the idea that there's a vent there and all the noise and smells are travelling through. That's pretty clever. The most interesting part of this episode is probably the nightmare scene. I have to admit, that locker is pretty freaky when it comes to life. That thing is seriously creepy. I think that a lot of kids might be scared by this. And while that can be a good thing to show kids some creepy stuff when they're younger, I can't help but think that it might be a little bit too much for some kids. I find myself questioning, if I were a child, would this be a bit too much for me? I think this thing would have actually scared me if I were a kid. Well, that's my review of The Haunted Locker. I hope you have a happy Halloween. Thanks for watching. Subscribe if you want to, don't if you don't.